Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science. You've come to the right place. Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
So, do you buy into the commonly held belief that marriage is hard work? If you do, then you're probably struggling more than you really have to in yours. Now, I see marriage as being a truly unique relationship because it has elements from every other relationship that you will ever have all rolled into one. It's a friendship, a business, a romance, a legal agreement, and in many cases, a family. And paying attention to all these inputs can be really challenging. But what if it could be easier? What if you adopted specific behaviors that have been proven to make success more likely? Well, if you're interested in that, you're in the right place, because my guest, psychotherapist, journalist, and author, Dr. Kathy McCoy, is here to talk about how you can do this. So, Kathy, thank you for coming on the show and talking about what everybody wants to know, the secrets to a successful marriage.
Well, thank you, Leslie. I'm delighted to talk about it. And I've done a lot of couples counseling in my life, and as well as individual. And I've also been married for 46 years, so I've learned a few things in all my process.
Right. It always comes to us as a surprise that when I talk to people, it's like, there's actually people who research relationships and marriages, and yes, we do have, anecdotal experience because I just celebrated my 37th wedding anniversary, but we do know some of these things that work, and you wrote a piece that's on the Psychology Today website titled 8 Secrets for Lasting Love. And that's what I want to talk about today. So we're going to start at the top and work through them and see what happens.
But what are the 8 secrets? Yes.
Well, I love this first one. Keep your expectations realistic, because I talk about expectations being the gremlins of relationships.
Oh my God.
So when you say that, what does that mean?
Well, I've seen so many couples who just come to couples counseling, and those are probably the lucky ones that actually go
Get
to
help,
couples counseling. Some of the rest just, But a lot of times they panic when, they get to the first downtime, or they get a little depressed, or they have a disagreement, and they think that, they have the expectation going into a marriage that their partner will always make them happy, and that downtimes and disappointments are signs that this love was not meant to be.
Right.
And, I got a little bit of a head start on that, because when I was getting married, I got this letter from the wife of a very dear friend of mine. And to set the stage a little bit on this is a guy who was my best friend from college. He still is my best friend from college. But when we were in college, I was totally in love with him and hoped he'd notice me as something besides a buddy, which he didn't.
Right.
And so when he fell in love with Barbara and married her, it just broke my heart in a million pieces for at least a year, and then I kind of got my sense of humor back, and we resumed our friendship.
Right.
But 11 years later, I was getting married, and Barbara sent me this letter that, was congratulating us, but she said, and a marriage can be a healthy and a growing place for both, but I think it's really important that you understand going in that there will be times of depression and times of loneliness that aren't because the relationship isn't good, but because these are things that are endemic to the human condition.
Right.
So don't blame your partner. Don't blame, I thought if she could be married to the best man in the world, the best man who ever lived, and still get depressed and lonely, who am I to get depressed and lonely, married to my husband, Bob, you know?
Right.
And so who is as hopelessly human as I am. So
Right.
I kind of, you know, I took her advice. What was interesting was that I made a copy of her letter and gave it to their adult daughter when she was getting married last year.
Oh, that's great.
And we were sitting there looking over the letter together, and I told her my, you know, how I found this particularly useful since, you know, Barbara was married to the best ever person who ever lived and breathed. And Mary Kate, their daughter Mary Kate said, well, you know, he's an A++ dad. And I know he's an A++ friend, but, you know, I think I'd give him a generous B as a husband because, you know, sometimes he doesn't always listen to her very much. And I know my mom can be difficult, but, you know, but really, you know, he's hopelessly human too.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, this is why, you know, people have these expectations of, oh, if I find the one, you know, they'll never hurt me. I actually did have a client, and I said to her, I said, if working with me is successful, what would that look like? And she said, my husband will never hurt me again. And I went,
oh my God.
And I went, yeah, that's not, I mean, now, not hurting somebody purposely is within our power, but not hurting them ever through misunderstandings or miscommunications or well, if he just loved me, he would know, the mind reading school of marriage. It's like, okay, those are not realistic expectations. Yes, we're both flawed human beings, and we have to figure out how to do that. So I love that one. So let's go to the second one, which is kind of related.
Just before we leave the first, I think that, you know, I like to emphasize that there are times of closeness and times of distance in any marriage. There are cycles.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's important not to panic during the time of distance, and that, you know you can be close again if you don't do anything to screw it up.
Right. If you don't do anything
by fleeing or attacking
having
your
an affair
partner
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's important to take responsibility for your own happiness and growth, and that can be empowering. And, you know, blaming your partner for not rescuing you or not shielding you from life's passages can, you know, help you to see and appreciate all he or she does do.
Right. I mean, and that's, by the way, that's not their job either. But this is the next one is actually related, and you say make your relationship a safe place.
Yes. And I think, you know, there are times of anger and distance, but love can survive if you're gentle with each other. I had a couple who used to just fight savagely. And, you know, every time they disagree, they start flinging the divorce word around.
Oh, yes.
And I used to say, don't go to the D word. I mean, that really says that your relationship is temporary and fragile.
Right.
And, you know, you might hang in there, and like our grandparents used to say, have you ever considered divorce? No. Murder, yes. Divorce.
Right. Right.
So the thing is that I think being gentle with each other, and, you know, as spouses, we know the tender spots and the hot buttons in our spouses, and to take a deep breath and not go there is so important. Creating safety means, you know, don't go for the tender spots, no displaced anger or caustic remarks or needless criticism or threats, you know, like divorce, unless, you know, you're really wanting to do that and you're planning to follow through. Hopefully not. But, you know, because it's good communication is so important even in the heat of conflict. And so I think that you can feel safe with each other. That's just so important.
Right, because, I mean, that's that, you know, Dr. Phil, love him or hate him, but that's, you know, your marriage, your home should be that safe place to fall. That it's like when I'm struggling, you know, in the world, somebody's got my back, which we're going to get to in just a minute. But the next one you talk about, which is so incredibly important, and the happiness studies bear this out, focus on the positives, not the negatives of your relationship, which just seems like a simple thing to do, but human beings are wired to pay attention to the negative, those things that can harm us. And so, you know, what do you recommend? Because I mean, I've had couples that's like, well, we never loved each other. It's like, can I take a look at your wedding photos, please? Because I don't believe that. I mean, and I actually was saying to a couple, I was going back to this. I said, well, if it's like, I cannot believe that it's always been this way, because if it's always been this way, I don't believe the two of you ever would have gotten married. And I shocked them. I shocked both of them, because it was like, because they've rewritten their history. So how can we get people to actually focus on the positives?
Well, I think that, I've said to couples sometimes, well, you've told me everything that's wrong with him. Now, what attracted you to begin with? I remember in couples counseling class, they used to tell us, when they start escalating, bring them back to, what brought them together in the first place. And I remember my first internship was working in a place with court-ordered couples and people in that. Oh my God. And so my first couple was a drug abusing couple who had been ordered into counseling, and they'd also been ordered into rehab. So they were clean and sober for the first time in their relationship, and their deal was they weren't sure they liked each other clean and sober. And so they came into the room, and they're fighting and cursing at each other and calling each other horrible names in two different languages and everything. And so finally, and I thought, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so finally I thought, bring it back to a happier place. Ask them how they met. And so I did, and they looked at me, suddenly united in their total disdain for me, and they said, we had the same crack dealer, okay?
Oh, Lord.
Oh, my God.
They're going, okay, what do I do with this one? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the worst case scenario. But generally, when you bring people back, what is it that attracted you to this person in the first place? And, the fact that, he or she has some irritating habits or things that are a little bit more than irritating, that's something to deal with. But think back on, how is he or she a good person? And what, it's like, for example, if you have a partner who has a tendency to clutter, maybe you can compromise. The clutter is confined to one room or to a closet. Or, in my case, I love to tell stories, and sometimes I tell the same stories depending on who's there. I'll tell the same story that my husband has probably heard
like 20 million times. Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he is so good about that. Because he'll smile and say, oh, it's like hearing a favorite song or a familiar tune.
Well, I mean,
he said, you're so consistent.
But that's putting a positive spin on something that could be allowed to be annoying, but and it is, and I think that people don't understand that we can choose what we focus on, and when we look for the positives, we're going to find them. But we have to be willing.
Absolutely.
But we have to be willing to look for them and not just dump everything into the doom and gloom bin. And so.
And it's important to forgive each other for not being perfect, and to remind yourselves of all the qualities that make your relationship special, in happier times.
Right. And so this next secret, which this one is so important, and you talk about team up, especially in a crisis, because I talk about marriage as being the ultimate team sport. But it's like somebody, like I was saying before, somebody's got my back. That I don't have to worry about what's going on behind me because somebody's got my back. But not if we're not working as a team. And and when you talk about a crisis, because one of the things that I have seen, because it's such a horrendous situation, is if somebody loses a child, that either drives the couple together or it blows them apart.
Yes.
Because of how they cope with that. And, you know, I mean, that's every parent's nightmare, of course, but you know, but it's different when you've got somebody who's working with you. So what do you recommend in terms of helping people see themselves as a team?
I think, you know, looking at something, you know, maybe it's a financial crisis or, you know, or losing a loved one, you know, heaven forbid a child, but I've seen that happen. And, you know, job layoffs or problems with kids. And, you know, with that one, you know, kids on drugs and one parent has one thing, you know, one parent may be enabling a little bit, and another person may be thinking it, yelling and screaming and laying down the law, and, you know, and so they may not agree on how to deal with it. But I think in this situation, to say to yourselves, look, this is something that we're both struggling with. It's, you know, impacting both of us or us as a family, and we need to do something to resolve this. Maybe we need help in doing that, but both seek the help together, again, as a team. You know, I think too often one might say, oh, you know, I don't believe in therapy, but you know, I'm not crazy. I'm just, you know, and so they don't go. But I think, you know, sometimes if you do kind of take a deep breath and seek family counseling or financial advice and counseling or whatever it is that will help you together to resolve this. Well, you know, it can have a really good outcome, you know, if you can't struggle through this together if you're too much at odds. But, you know, it's important not to see each other as the enemy during something like this, even if one person's layoff or financial mistakes has led to the problem. You know, obviously, you know, this can break you apart, or you can solve it together. Right, and it's so much better if you can.
And I mean, and what was it? Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that created it. So sometimes you need that outside help, that somebody who can see it from a different viewpoint, because, you know, I only know the solutions I know. I don't know. You know, so if somebody can give me another solution, oh, well, that's a good idea. So, you know, I love, it's like, I like to tell people, it's like, therapy is not, it's like, I don't want crazy people in my office, and most of my clients aren't crazy. They're just struggling with the normal everyday stuff that they don't know. So I want to remind my listeners that This Is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dories, and I'm talking with psychotherapist, journalist, and author Dr. Kathy McCoy about ways you can make your marriage stronger and more enjoyable. And if you're finding your marriage more difficult than you would like it to be, you're not alone, and you may even be wondering if it's worth it anymore. The truth is, most marriages can become easier and more fulfilling if you know what works. And if you'd like the inside scoop on having a better marriage, I can help. I invite you to take a moment and send me an email or give me a phone call and schedule your free, no-obligation 5-star relationship call. You can reach me by email at Leslie, Lesli, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS. Coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com, or you can give me a call at area code 919-924-0463. Again, that's 919-924-0463. And I want to get back to the 8 secrets. We've done 4, and now we're going to do the other 4 about having a good marriage. So this one is an interesting one, because I know what you mean by it, but sometimes – well, no, actually, I 100% agree about pay attention to the small stuff, because there's a lot of people that's like, don't sweat the small stuff, and I disagree with that.
And this is the other side of the coin, because I know don't sweat the small stuff. It's like, you know, don't go ballistic because somebody squeezes the toothpaste tube in the middle. I mean, please do not go there. But what I mean by the paying attention to the small stuff, it's just small acts of kindness with each other, you know, acts, you know, showing affection.
Please and thank you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. For starters, yeah, and being, expressing gratitude for the other. For sometimes my husband will go to Starbucks and get dragon fruit lemonade, and I'm in here doing telehealth, and he will open the door just a crack, and his arm will go through, and he'll set the drink. I have a little refrigerator near the door, and so he puts his arm in, and he then closes the door in. So that
it's like magic, right?
Yeah, my client, all of a sudden this drink appears, and I always thank him for it. And I thought, oh, gee, and it always seems to be just at the time when I could really use that. But, I had a client the other day who said something to me. She recently took a trip with her oldest son and his wife, and she was recently widowed after an absolutely horrible marriage. And she said that she was very moved to see how her son and daughter-in-law held hands and spontaneously expressed their love, and that they, gave each other little cards on any occasion, and just were so affectionate to each other. And she said wistfully that she never had that kind of affection in either of her two marriages. And, I think, oh, gosh, that's so sad because she's such a lovely person. Yeah. And I know that if she had ever had a spouse who would reciprocate with that, or, who would inspire her to express, affection, that it could have been so different for her. So I think that just the little things, a special gift, a note, a warm embrace, can go such a long way toward keeping your love alive.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like it does. I mean, when people talk about being hard work, it's like it doesn't have to take that much work. It just takes some attention. It's like, say, please, thank you. How was your day? You look tired, or I'm heading into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Can I get you something? I mean, these very small things that are so powerful. Now, the next one you have, I love, which is have fun and laugh together. It's like people get so, either they're not spending time with each other, which I mean, on some level I do understand, but having fun and laughing together is so connecting.
It is, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. You can do that, after a busy day at work or something, maybe, think about little in-jokes you might have, or, or a line from a movie both of you found amusing at one point, and you bring it up again, and, it's just the in-jokes are a shared hobby, or maybe there's a film, a TV show that you both find funny and enjoy laughing. But my husband and I have a thing where we try to make mundane housework that we do in between all our busy schedules. My husband does more than I do, but we call it stealth housework. And, he might go in, and I've just come home after a long day, and I'm, saying hello to the cats, and he sneaks into the laundry room and folds all the laundry and puts it away before I have a chance to notice.
Right. Yeah.
And then I notice, and I go, oh, my God, you did that.
Right.
Starts laughing, and he's, yes. And I try to do the same thing with taking the dishes out of the dishwasher. It's almost a game because he's sitting not that far away. We have an open kitchen that opens into the great room. And so I make a game of trying to take everything out of the dishwasher, including the silverware, without him knowing it. And then he'll come into the kitchen and say, damn, I didn't even truly. I
didn't hear you do anything.
Yeah, and so it's, I think we're easily amused.
Well, but
it's
But again, that also goes back to the positive, paying attention to the positives, because it's so much easier to laugh and have fun. And it's so funny because before I became a therapist, I worked in retail. And so, I would come, I would be wearing high-heeled shoes or whatever. So I would come home and literally kick off my shoes wherever I just happened to feel like kicking them off. And my husband was like, sweetheart, could you please put your shoes away? Yeah, I'll get to it. Well, one day I came home and opened up my front door to find, I kid you not, 8 pairs of shoes walking towards the bedroom.
Oh my gosh.
I burst out laughing. I thought, this was the most creative thing, because he'd gotten really tired of asking me, and it did. It just made me laugh, and it's like, got it. As opposed to just,
that's great.
And it was, I just thought it was the most hysterical thing to see these, all the shoes walking towards the bedroom. So I mean, these kind of things
very creative.
Yeah, and it's much better than nagging, and so.
Oh, it is.
And so having fun and laughing together kind of requires your next one, which is be present.
Yeah.
So talk about that one.
And that means it means showing up for each other. It means maybe listening without planning a response, or doing something like enduring the tedium of holidays with relatives, his or yours, or visits from his or her old friends with an open heart and mind, because it makes your partner happy.
Yes.
And responding to a challenge or a crisis with empathy rather than impatience, or living with gratitude. We've got into this a little bit earlier, for what is good, rather than taking each other for granted. And it can also mean, communicating your feelings rather than closing off and shutting your spouse out when you're feeling sad or scared. And, sharing your joys and vulnerabilities really enhances your love over the years. And, silent treatment doesn't do that.
No.
Yeah, that can be a whole passive-aggressive thing. But, it's just being there for each other is so important. And it sounds very basic, but I think a lot of people forget that.
Well, but this is where, because you were talking about earlier about, the potential of feeling lonely in a relationship. And, and sometimes that's because, some of it can be long-term stuff, but some of it is, when we're present with each other, we see each other. We are intentionally spending time, and and I know it can be really challenging, but I think there was a book written, I don't know how many, probably now 10 years ago, called 168 Hours. It may even be longer ago than that, but that's how much time we all have per week. No, I don't care how much money you have. Whatever. Nobody gets more than 168 hours a week. And, and somebody else said a good, solid relationship, the couple spends 15 hours of uninterrupted one-on-one time together a week. So we're talking about 10% of how much time we have in a week that we spend with each other. And it's like, you don't have that time to spend with each other? That's what you're going to say me, And it's like, because I get it. But a marriage is not going to survive on neglect. We can't stick it in the corner and come back in 10 years and dust it off. It's like, I get it. I raised 2 kids to adulthood. Yay. They're on their own. Woohoo. And we did it with the intention of, the kids are eventually going to leave. We need to be taking care of this. So we've gone on vacations, just the 2 of us. We've done, when the kids were little, we would stick them in the room with a movie, and my husband and I would have a candlelit dinner every Friday night. And it's like telling the kids, it's like, do not walk into the dining room unless the house is on fire or one of you is bleeding, because there's going to and they just adjusted to it. So, it's being present. It's like, this is why you got together. And then this last one is really interesting, and I really like it, because I really think that's what marriage is designed to do. But you say, allow each other room to grow.
Yes. And, some spouses fight change and growth because they fear a partner growing away. And unfortunately, this can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if one partner is impervious to change. I have a client at the moment who's in the middle of a divorce, and she's 30 years old. And she was married for 12 years to her husband, and she said, to be fair to him, when she married him, she was attracted to him because he had a job and a really cool truck. that.
Right, okay.
So her thing going in wasn't exactly, for an in-depth relationship. But during their time together, she has worked and gone to school, and she eventually got a degree. She has a really good job. He's still working kind of part-time things, and, hasn't. And she's said, let's take a course together. Let's learn a language together. Let's do things together. And he hasn't been interested in that. Except, he wants to play video games and hang out with his buddies. And that's what pleases him. But he, she's pleaded with him over the years, okay, I play video games with you. Can we do something together, that pleases me? And he was, no, I don't want to take a class. I don't want to do this. Yeah. And so they just have gradually grown apart. And she said, I find I can't really have a good conversation with him. And she said, I think my needs are changing with time too.
Right.
And so, she said he's a good person, but I can't, I just can't go on with this.
Well, and I look at marriages. To me, it's designed to make us grow, because I'm having to work with this other person, and we have to figure these things out. And sometimes I like it. Very early on, I was at a seminar, and he was talking about marriage. It's like you're in a boat together. And you get in the boat and you set sail, and now you got to figure out how you're going to ride through the storms, and what direction you're going to go, and are you both rowing in the same direction? I thought it was a great analogy, and and I also liken marriage to a three-legged race. My daughter is my son's 6'1" with very long arms and legs, and my daughter, we jokingly call her vertically challenged. And so if they were going to be tied together, he would have to slow down, she would have to speed up. We have to adjust to the rhythms of this other person. And that requires the ability to handle growth and change.
Oh, yeah.
both individually, and as our couple. So it's kind of like, the jigsaw puzzle, that the pieces are kind of always changing. And, and this idea that probably my values are still the same as when I met my husband, but my interests have changed. And, like I said, when we met, I was doing retail, and then I did something completely different. So, it's like we don't, we're not going to stay the same. And so how do we not get freaked out by
I think we have
whatever?
Oh yeah, and I think that's a biggie, because I know I went back to school. My first 2 college degrees are in journalism, and I worked as a journalist and a writer years before I ever went back to school and became a therapist. And I remember when I was going back to school, people were saying, to my husband, she's going to be a therapist. She's going to be analyzing you all the time. This is going to be horrible. And, he didn't realize I am so off duty when I go. But anyway, it was funny because the advantages of my doing this, he said, became apparent very early on when I was doing my first internship, the one with the court ordered people.
Right.
Because I was doing it for 9 hours on Sundays.
Oh my goodness.
Because I was working full time, and that was the only time I could do the internship. And so I would come home on Sunday night, and I would look at him and I'd say, Bob, you're so wonderful. I appreciate you so much.
Yes.
And he would say, this is going to be very good.
Right.
But, it took he always took a lot of pleasure in seeing me do work I loved.
Yeah.
And was very generous about that, and enjoyed my pleasure in the work, and also enjoyed seeing me try something quite different from what I've been doing before. It isn't quite as drastically different as, he thought initially, but, and so, it was something that helped a great deal. I remember in the PhD program, somebody said during convocation, one of the administrators said, well, say goodbye to your spouse now because it'll be 5 years before you can really connect again. And I thought, oh, my God, that's horrible. And so when I was in a position to say something to incoming graduate students, it was like, hold your spouse tight.
Yep.
You're in this together.
Yeah.
And so I think to see a person acquiring new skills or growing intellectually or going back to school and making a career change, I think it's even more important to, again, as we talked about earlier, see each other as a team.
Yep.
This is something that's going to require efforts and sacrifices for both of you, and may also be rewarded just to see a person you love grow into something different. And I think that my husband and I've been able to appreciate his professional growth as well.
Yeah.
He made a little bit of a turn inside his real profession into doing something that he never thought he would do, which was he went from production to sales.
Yep.
And he never imagined himself doing sales. He found he liked it quite well.
Good for him.
So it I think that it can be rewarding for both, but for some person to try to prevent somebody from doing something that's really important for them, that's really crucial to their growth, can sow seeds of discord for decades to come.
Absolutely. So, Kathy, thank you so much for sharing these wonderful tips. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about, your writing and because you write a column for Psychology Today?
They could find my writing website, which is Dr. Kathy McCoy, and that's Kathy with a K. It's DrKathyMcCoy.com. And that has all my books, and it also has a way, if you want to send me a message, ask a question, or whatever, you can send me a message through the website also.
So fantastic. So I have long said that no one takes the Relationship 101 class, and everyone should. This includes people who are already married and those who are considering it, because there is a lot of information available about what works and what doesn't. And those in successful relationships have embraced learning about and applying what works. So hopefully you walked away with some great tips for today. And the question that I have is, what would help you get started to use those tips? And hopefully one of the things that you'll keep doing in support of your marriage is to keep listening to this show. And until next week, stay loving.